over the years of being a golf coach, there was always one golfer that I had just a pure fascination towards, and it's Ben Hogan. Ben Hogan, in my opinion, was just so iconic because of his swing, because of also his ability to illustrate what he was doing at that time was fantastic, and also just his ability to demonstrate it so brilliantly as well has just obviously put his name in the history books forever. And like lots of you, we'll always sort of look at the swing and what is the secret to Hogan? Although ultimately there was no secret, just hard work and a good understanding, there were a couple of bits of information that, should we say, that he passed on and he leaked throughout his career, which he really attributed towards his success. And there was one thing in particular where he talked about a drill that he would do sort of 20 minutes a day to get himself sort of warmed up and moving. And I really like it. And it's something that I wanted to talk about today and put just a little bit of a twist into it. Now, Hogan starts off talking about just simplicity of what you want to do is you want to kind of keep your elbows connected to the side of your body. Now, to elaborate on that a little bit, one of the things that I say to a lot of my students is, you know, the biggest problem with amateur golfers is if your arms are bending, right? So if you're sort of pulling your arms up, look at my elbows, see the way that they move further apart. If I can kind of keep my elbows a little closer together, it's the same sort of term as keeping your arms straight. So lots of golfers that I meet will swing back and they'll sort of get the elbows will bend too much because it means the hands are getting too close, and then the hands are getting too close. So what Hogan talks about initially in this part of the exercise is keep your elbows to the side of your body. And I like to think of that as keeping your arms relatively straight. And then he just sort of talks about just short swings, back and through. Okay, little half swings where you just sort of turn your body back, turn your body through, and keeping those arms nice and straight, and then advancing it obviously to a much longer and fuller swing because of the simple fact, as he states, that obviously I'm going to have to let my elbows leave my side to complete the full backswing position. But I do think many golfers would just benefit from having a very competent sort of 3/4 swing where you're able to feel like your arms are working in more harmony towards your body. So the way that I've said it to some of my students and the way that I've done it in a few of the lessons, particularly more recently, are for golfers that are really struggling with, should we say, overthinking and are really struggling with contact. Now, to get good contact on the golf ball, you have to have this ability to strike an inch in front of the ball. And you just need to be mindful of that. So what I've done for a few students is I've said, look, get the club on the ground, focus your attention an inch ahead, but do this drill. Okay? Now, what I've also said to people though is hit the ground. Sounds very obvious, but try and hit the ground on the way back and on the way through and on the way back and on the way through. And the reason for that is because I think it's a very clever way of ensuring that you are keeping your arms straight. Because if you are somebody who bends your arms and then sort of straightens them and then bends your arms, you're not going to be able to hit the ground on the way back as I would like you to. So by practicing keeping those arms straight, can you hear the way I'm able to brush the ground on the way back and on the way through? And this essentially just means that I am therefore keeping width, which means I'm keeping my arms straight enough to control that low point every time. Now, the other thing that you should find with this exercise very naturally is when you start recoiling it. So what I mean by that is just using sort of momentum of not stopping. And when golfers stop not stopping, right, so meaning, you know, don't do this drill and then sort of start again, by moving back and forth, always triggers much better movement. So golfers naturally start to rotate the body back and through so much better when you start to use momentum. Now, this is why when we see pros, and we see it with Hogan and we see it with all great golfers, is they don't look static over the ball. They get set up, there's a lot of wiggling and moving, and there's always like a shift. See what I'm doing here? So I shift towards this trail side very quickly in that early backswing, and then I shift left, shift right, shift left, shift right, shift left. Now, That's always a difficult thing to get amateur golfers to do and to introduce into their swing, because if that becomes such a consciousness, it becomes tricky, because then golfers tend to start forcing it, they tend to move a little bit too much. But what you can do as time goes on is you can go back to this exercise, okay, and start with a very narrow stance this time. So hit the ground, and then just incrementally, so the way I'm just widening my stance each and every time I'm doing that move. Okay, so I start with the very narrowing stance. And can you see the way that we'll put a couple of those in slow motion as well, so you can see the way that I'm just taking a little bit of a wider stance each and every time. Now, I think the big thing about this, which I really sometimes think most golfers underestimate, is some of the things that you're going to practice might be quite easy. So I gave a lesson literally just today where the student was really struggling with rotation. So I got them doing a drill where they put the feet like this. That introduced much better rotation, less sway. And then they left the lesson playing golf with just adopting a stance which is slightly more closed. Perfectly fine. That will suit them in the short term, it will suit them in the medium to long term as well, fine. However, sometimes things are difficult. And the idea is to understand, like Hogan said, if you can do 10 minutes, 20 minutes a day of something that is testing you, that you know that you struggle with short term, but the more you practice, the better you're going to get at it, you are going to improve. And I see this with students all the time. The students that I get the opportunity to work with, that have the right mentality to allow themselves to be patient and to grow with it, and they do drills as I've demonstrated, or sometimes I get students to do drills like a single-handed only drill, trail and lead. These are exercises which are very, very difficult to do, especially initially, but if you can do 10 minutes every other day, 3 times a week, you're going to start to accumulate hours and hours as time goes on, and you're only going to get better at these types of drills as long as you keep trying. So I genuinely think starting with this type of exercise, just brushing the ground, only swinging 3/4, and then advancing it as time goes on, if you can, once you've done enough practice, to allowing your feet to move, as I demonstrated earlier. And then when you next go to the range, you should notice those little 3/4 swings are just going to lend themselves to probably about as far as you would hit a full swing, but it is going to make a massive difference, I promise you. So give it a go, let me know. I'll catch you with you really soon.